Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning. Oh, excuse me. Happy Wednesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I want to urge you, please take advantage of our fantastic two-book special for the month of January 2025. But let's dig right back into Daniel chapter 12. I told you yesterday, and I have said this on many occasions, and I wrote one large book on Daniel chapter 12, the resurrection of Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, fulfilled or future. And I go into great detail, far greater detail than I'm going to be able to do here in my videos. But here's the point. Yesterday I read for you, and here's the reason why. Because in Matthew chapter 13, Jesus predicted harvest. That's the fulfillment of Succot, the last of Israel's 7 feast days. Jesus said harvest is at the end of the age. Well, guess what? In Matthew chapter 13, verse 43, Jesus said, then when? The end of the age. That's the suntelia to aionion. Then shall the righteous shine forth in the kingdom. Well, most scholars who examine the Old Testament background of the New Testament passages admit, realize, and say Matthew 13:43 is based squarely upon its echoing Daniel chapter 12, verse 3 and 4. What does Daniel chapter 12, verse 3 and 4 say? Well, they that shall be wise, when is this? At the resurrection, which is the harvest. They that shall be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament. They that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. Now, folks, look, if you don't see an echo, or if you don't hear an echo of Daniel chapter 12, verse 3, in Matthew 13:43, may I respectfully say, you're not listening. It's very clear. And you know what? If you have a really good center column reference, it will point it out. Now, I've got a really old version of the King James here, and it doesn't list Matthew 13:43. Now, in my center column reference, pardon me, I don't think I've ever done this before. So this is kind of interesting. I don't even know what I'm going to find here, verse. So, pages won't turn this morning. Verse 43, and center column reference, Daniel chapter 12, verse 3. Matthew 13:43, drawing on Daniel chapter 12, verse 3. I didn't have to have a center column reference to know that, ladies and gentlemen. It's just there. Okay, so as I promised, in order to help us fully realize the force of Daniel 12 and its application to the harvest, the end of the age, I want to look at some of the constituent elements of Daniel chapter 12. This will take a few videos, okay? Just fair warning here. But I don't believe we have to be in a hurry in order to properly exegete the scripture. Do you? Just the other day, someone on Facebook mocked me, literally, because someone posted this great big long dissertation attacking me, and this person chimed in and they said, oh, well, Preston probably make a couple of thousand videos in response. And my response to that is, I didn't say this. I did, So what? If I can go in depth and I can share with you as much pertinent information as is relevant, salient to the issue, why wouldn't I? Am I on some restriction and limitation about how many videos I can produce to address a given topic? I didn't realize that. But you see, the reason people don't like me doing that is the more in depth that I go, the more it refutes futurism, or the more it refutes their pet doctrine or whatever. So no, they don't like it that I produce a lot of videos. Okay, all that aside. So I mentioned yesterday that I want to discuss Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. And here's the reason why. It begins with, and at that time. Well, we are told by the liberal scholars, well, this is a reference back to Daniel chapter 11. Well, that's obviously the antecedent. No question about that. But we are told, and we are told this by noted scholars such as John Collins, who denies inspiration, who denies biblical infallibility, who denies the deity of Christ. He believes that Daniel 11 and 12, all of it, has to do with the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. So his argument is this. Well, in Daniel chapter 11, you have the time of Antiochus Epiphanes being discussed. And in Daniel chapter 12, we have sort of kind of a break. In a great part of Daniel chapter 11, what you have is a historical recounting of what had already happened. Okay? But it's couched in terms of prophecy. In other words, the writer is being deceitful. And then John Collins says, and yes, he says it, and this is the criteria upon which many liberal scholars work. They base their comments on the following. John Collins says, up to a given point in Daniel chapter 11, you have past events described as if it was prophecy. But then this fella, who is not really Daniel, he's just calling himself Daniel in order to give credibility to his work, even though there was never such a man as Daniel, the prophet. Does that make any sense to you? Doesn't to me either. So, at this given point in Daniel chapter 11, this, quote, fake Daniel, unquote, now begins to give a real prophecy. And how do we know that it is a real prophecy, according to John Collins? Well, we know it's a real prophecy because it failed. You catch the power of that, folks? John Collins says everything up to these particular verses, historical, past events, stated as if it were prophecy. But now this guy, claiming to be Daniel, begins to make real prophecy. And once again, the reason that we know it's real prophecy is because it failed. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that doesn't even make good nonsense. That is argumentum ad absurdum. It's an argument that is so ridiculous, so absurd, as to be dismissed. I will not go into great detail about how in Daniel chapter 11, somewhere around verse 36 and following, the attention and the focus shifts from exclusive focus on Antiochus Epiphanes to Rome. A very, very, very famous story is recounted in Daniel chapter 11, 36 and following, Notable scholars, even men such as John Collins, take note of what happened. But he fails to note that the focus is now no longer exclusively on Antiochus and his exploits. Now the focus is on the ascendancy of Rome. And it is in that time, it's in those days that Daniel was told, there shall be great tribulation, such as never was to that time or ever shall be. Now, so here we have men such as John Collins. And by the way, apologize, former preterists such as Sam Frost and others who have followed him off down that primrose path, now says, well, yeah, Daniel chapter 12, verse 1 is talking about the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. That's clear. It has to be true because of the antecedent of at that time, which ignores everything that I just said. Secondly, while he posits the Great Tribulation as the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, he says Daniel chapter 12, verse 2 is the end of time. Now, when he very first came out with that view, and that, believe you me, that was not his original take on it. He's vacillated on Daniel chapter 12 many times, at least 4 times that I'm aware of. So anyway, so when I confronted him about what that meant was, he is inserting a gap of so far, and this is what happens when you abandon the text. This means that Sam Frost has inserted a gap of 2,500 years into the period at the end of Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, and that this prediction of the resurrection at the supposed end of time is just arbitrarily, capriciously, with no contextual indication whatsoever that this is an interjection. Verse 2 is just slipped right into the text. Verse 3 and 4, he's a little ambiguous on that, it seems to me. Maybe I didn't read him clearly enough, but it seems to me he reverts to the Antiochian application. For sure he does for verse 6 and 7. So I don't know how he would avoid that in verse 3 and 4. I'd have to go back and read his book on Daniel, which I really hate doing. Nonetheless, do you see what's happening here? We're being told that the prediction was that the Great Tribulation would be in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. The resurrection of Daniel chapter 12, verse 2. In other words, the fulfillment of Succot is the end of time. Well, let me make this very, very, very quick observation here. And I'm running out of time. I knew I would. That means that Mr. Frost, by positing Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, at the end of time, is putting the fulfillment of the old covenant at the end of time. He is putting the fulfillment of God's old covenant promises made to old covenant Israel at the end of time, at the end of the Christian age. But wait a minute. Jesus said, "Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill the law and the prophets." That's an elliptical situation. "For verily I say unto you, until heaven and earth passes away, not one jot, not one tittle shall pass from the law and the prophets until it is all fulfilled." Thus, if the resurrection of Daniel chapter 12 and verse 2 has not been fulfilled, then every jot, every tittle of the old law and the prophets remains valid and binding today. And thus that means Mr. Frost has two covenants, fully in effect, fully binding, fully applicable for the last 2,000 years, which, by the way, he has condemned in the past. That is, of positing two laws existing side by side. Just another blatant inconsistency on his part. Do you see the issue, ladies and gentlemen? So the great question becomes, is it valid to argue that the great tribulation of Daniel chapter 12 verse 1 occurred in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes? I want to suggest to you that is an absolutely untenable position, but I'm out of time today. I will demonstrate how that position, now remember, and I'm going to prove this, the Great Tribulation and the resurrection are inseparably bound up in the Old Testament. Absolutely inseparably bound up. Thus, if you posit the Great Tribulation in the time of Antiochus, you therefore must posit the resurrection in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes in the 2nd century BC. I don't think that's going to work. Do you? Okay, hey, listen. Thanks again for joining me. Be sure to join Mike Sullivan and me as we get back together tonight to talk about the impact of the Song of Solomon on New Testament eschatology. Be sure to join me as I get back with Zach Davis as we talk about the transition of the covenants in 2 Corinthians chapters 3 through 6. Later this week as well, be sure to join me on Friday as I continue my review and response to Brian Hodge and his book, Problems with Preterism. My plate is full. I hope my voice lasts. Okay? Thanks for joining me. I'll see you tonight.